Hey guys, Christy Knight here, and I'm in the Card Player Studios today with Scott Seiver, also known as Gunning for You and Master Blaster online. And we're going to talk about the concept of resealing, which is oh so important in No Limit Hold'em tournaments. So, first of all, explain what resealing is for those who don't know.
Basically, it's when someone is raising to try and win the blinds, and you feel that they have just a marginal hand because they're just trying to pick up the blinds, and you're looking to 3-bet them to try and win the blinds, plus their raise because you feel they don't have a good enough hand to call with.
So, what types of players do you want to reseal from, and what quantifies that?
Basically, you want to look for a player in late position who's raising a lot of hands, who's being very aggressive, and you want to look in yourself to have a hand that you don't want to just reseal with 7 deuce off because you feel like resealing. You want a hand that's at least somewhat decent, that will have some good percent of winning, even if you happen to get called on your reseal. So you're looking for these two things to line up, where someone raises late and you have a decent but not great hand, and you don't want too big a stack. You want to have around, if you're going all in on your reseal, you can have as much as, say, 6 or 7 times the size of their bet. Or in a normal spot where you both have a lot of chips, you are looking to maybe just 4 times their normal, 4x their normal bet as your reseal. You don't really need to risk more to try and win what's out there.
Okay, and what kind of stack should the player you're going after have? They need to have enough to fold, is that right?
Yeah, they need to have a stack that at least the all-in will matter to them some amount. So you're looking for them to have maybe, say, 25 big blinds or more to think about wanting to reseal them. And the only problem when they have a small stack like that, if you have them covered, is that you might have to call their all in because you've put so much in. So even more ideally, you're looking for an opponent that has between 30 and 40 big blinds when you 3-bet them for the reseal.
Okay. Well, if they have a really big stack and you guys are both pretty deep, do you run the risk of him calling light in position to try and pick you off or try and flop a hand?
You do, which is why I don't recommend resealing out of position in this spot, because especially in today's tournaments, people seem to really like calling when they're in position and using their position because it really is that powerful. So you don't want to be using a bad hand that now you have a very big pot in. Although for the exact same reasons, when you both have a lot of chips, I think you should reseal a lot of the time when you're in position. So specifically, like when you're in the button and they're in the cutoff or before you and they raise, this is a really good spot to look for a pretty decent but even a pretty weak hand to be resealing with, because now they can't call you too wide because they're out of position.
Okay, that's a very good point. Now, what comes into it when you have a loose image and you're trying to reseal? Does that mean you need to make your ranges for resealing better?
Yes, you do, because they're going to assume you're resealing some amount of the time and possibly just shove on you with bad hands, basically re-resealing from you. So you want to do it with a tighter range so that more of the times when you're 3-betting in the spot, you actually have the big hand like queens, kings, or aces, as opposed to, say, ace-5 or ace-4 that we're resealing with.
Okay, so let's talk about when you're resealing in position. If you feel like you're resealing against a player who is going to call not a lot of the time, but a fair amount of the time, would you rather have a hand like ace rag or like a suited connector?
If they're going to call a bunch, I would certainly rather a suited connector because we can play the hand more safely and know our flops and whatnot. However, if they're the kind of player that just 4-bets all in a lot or folds, I would much rather the ace rag, because when we have an ace in our hand, it makes it much less likely that they have an ace in their hand. And since all the best hands usually have aces in them, it means they are much less likely to have a good hand. But if they're going to call a bunch, you would certainly rather like the 8-9 or the 9-10 suited.
Okay. Now, how does resealing come into play differently for cash games versus sit-and-goes versus multi-table tournaments?
In sit-and-goes, you're not resealing much at all. You're shoving a lot with poor hands, which I guess is resealing, but it's much more just trying to, there's so much money in the middle already compared to how small your stack is, that you're never resealing without being all in. Okay. So you don't have to worry about their stack size at all, basically, the original raisers. You're just caring about your own. You're looking for a stack size of like 15 to 20 big blinds, and then when they raise, if you think it's a good reseal spot, you just go all in. Versus in a multi-table tournament, there's the combination of at the beginning you might be restealing when you're 40 to 100 big blinds deep, and then as you get later, you're hopefully learning about the players enough to know, ooh, I can be looking in the future to resteal off this guy here and waiting for an opportunity. In a cash game, you're restealing a bunch of the time because they're played very aggressively, and people are raising the button in the cutoff with a very wide range. So we're looking to resteal with a pretty wide range from the blinds here against them very often, because most people won't call, because most cash games are played 100 big blinds deep, and it becomes very tough to play a 3-bet pot when you're not the aggressor at 100 big blinds deep. So most people look to avoid it.
Okay. Now, with the ultra-aggressive styles of poker players these days, how would you defend against a resteal? So say you're in late position and you want to go for the blinds and antes, and you've got a medium to large stack in the blinds. How do you avoid getting pushed on or
Well, based on how much they're restealing, if they're restealing so much that you think it's bad for you, you can just actually start folding hands and be like, okay, I'll let them win these small battles, and I'll try and win the war, and I'll just raise when I have a pretty big hand, and they'll still resteal on me, and then I can go all in and have it. Or if you just think they're restealing a decent amount and a little too much, you can keep raising to try and take the blinds, and then when you have a decently good hand, something you wouldn't normally go all in with, but like king queen suited or ace queen or ace jack suited, and they keep 3-betting you, you can go all in with these hands as well to try and resteal their resteal, basically.
Okay. Well, what about making a larger than standard raise so that maybe they know that with their stack size they can't resteal because you're priced in? Does that seem like that would be a strategy that would work?
It works very well if everyone has similar stack sizes.
Okay.
Like if everyone's around 30, 35 big blinds, then you can be, say, 4xing your raise, and then they don't have a resteal size that is profitable for them other than shoving. The issue comes, though, at any multi-table tournament or sit and go, is that one person will have 20 big blinds, one will have 50, one will have 80. So once you're making it 4x, you're hurting yourself against some of the other guys just trying to get to the restealer, and you never want to be trying to make a poker strategy that's just to get back at one guy. So it doesn't work too well in multi-tables because of that, but it's definitely something to look at when everyone has similar stack sizes.
Okay. Now, the reason why I chose you to talk about resealing is because back in the during the World Series of Poker, I interviewed you after your bracelet win, and you said that there was a turning point at the final table where you saw an opportunity that you wanted to reseal, but you ended up not being able to. Can you explain that situation and your thought processes of why you wanted to reseal and stack sizes and everything?
Sure. Basically, what happened was the cutoff was Jacobo Fernandez, who's a good player and fairly tight, though, and definitely the stack sizes were that anyone would be pretty scared of getting all in at this point. We were, I believe, 6-handed left, and I had most of the chips, and everyone was pretty close to each other. The button 3-bet, whose name is Raj, and he's a pretty aggressive player that plays online as well. And it definitely seemed that he could have a wide range here because he had Jacobo slightly covered and knew that Jacobo would not want to bust to him because of that, because they were second and third in chips, basically. And it just seemed at a really good spot that I was in the big blind, and if I just 4-bet all in with any two cards, Jacobo wouldn't call without kings or aces.
Because you seem so strong.
Because I seem even stronger, and since I have all of them covered, any of them would go out of the tournament to me, and they were valuing their tournament life, which was correct to do so because we were at a final table with very steep payouts. So
and Raj had enough equity to fold, right?
He 3-bet about 25, maybe even 30% of his stack.
Okay.
But I still felt that he just wouldn't be able to call with pretty much anything because he'd be so scared of it. However, the small blind cold 4-bet all in, and I really couldn't do anything at that point. I looked down, I had 8-5 offsuit. I'm like, well, I can't call all in with 8-5, so I just folded the hand. But as it turned out, Jacobo folded his hand and was upset about it, but told me he would have instantly folded to me as well. It was the same situation. And Raj thought that the small blind was more aggressive than I was, and since he had the small blind covered, he wouldn't bust from it, and was very upset and did some math for a while, and ended up calling with Jack 4 offsuit.
Oh, okay.
And it was definitely a spot where if I had been the one making that shove, he wouldn't have been able to call, because it would have been for all his chips. But since the small blind had fewer chips, he was able to call, and the small blind had aces and won.
Wow, that's incredible, and that's a really good read. And so from there, you had confidence in your read, in your resealing abilities, and your feel for the table to go ahead and win that bracelet.
It definitely made me feel that I knew what was going on. I knew correct spots to reseal, and even though I didn't get to do it myself, I saw that I would have been correct, and used that to not doubt myself when I saw other resealing spots in the future.
And the one thing that's really important to be able to reseal is guts, right?
Oh,
You have
yeah.
to be able to pull the trigger.
Basically, whenever I'm talking to my friends about a poker hand, they'll tell me, well, this happened and this happened, and normally I would do this, but I was just scared to do so. However, they say that all the time, and I don't know when that normally is. And you basically just need to say, okay, I'm going to raise here, I know it's right. Even if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean it wasn't right. And it's all about just letting yourself realize that you can do this, and it can work, and not to be so nervous and scared about it.
But also to consider all those things that we talked about today.
Definitely.
All right, well, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you
to see
very
me today.
much. It was
All
very
right.
good to be here.
Christy Arnett with Scott Seiver for Card Player TV.